You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 6 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. The Boston Bruins ended the month of January 11-2-1 overall and 9-0-0 on home ice following a 6-3 win against the Philadelphia Flyers on Thursday night. So we'll detail that game as well as the storylines that followed. Now, speaking of the Flyers, 2 of Boston's previous 5 outdoor games came against the Broad Street Bullies. So as we preview Boston's next outdoor game, which is this weekend against the Tampa Bay Lightning, we'll be ranking those games from worst to best. And then to finish things off today, we'll have a Q&A from you, the listeners. Now, before we get started on all of that, just a friendly reminder that if you haven't done so already, to please subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X, @BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show, @thepuckups. Or you can even call and leave a voicemail to be aired right here on this show by calling 617-539-6958. That's 617-539-6958. The biggest storyline coming out of the Bruins and Flyers game is the continued emergence of Fraser Minten. And we'll get to that later on, trust me. But the biggest storyline heading into the Bruins and Flyers game was Matt Poitras being recalled from the Providence Bruins for the first time this season. Now, Matty Poitras has been a polarizing prospect since pretty much day one in the Bruins organization. He makes the team out of camp back in the 23-24 season as a 19-year-old. And he deserved to make that roster. He had a great preseason. He had a good start to his year. He works hard. He has good hockey IQ, good offensive instincts. And there's good reason for him to have a lot of fans throughout Bruins Nation. At the same time, there's a reason or reasons why he hasn't been able to stick at the NHL level to this point in his very young career. He's still only 21 years old. I think chief among them is physical maturity. I think that when he made the team as a 19-year-old, he got pushed around a little bit by some bigger, stronger players. And I'm not faulting him for it. When you're 19 years old, that's going to happen when you're playing against 25, 29, 33, 37-year-olds. Like, you're barely out of high school at 19 years old, and you're going up against grown men who have, families of their own. And so it's a different animal. And the game happens at a very fast pace, and it's an adjustment. So I think Bruins fans saw a young 19-year-old Poitras doing pretty well, all things considered, and then they haven't seen him around in quite some time, and there's a big question mark. Well, hold on a second. If he was doing that at 19, then you don't think he can do it at 21, 22, right? So I do get those fans. But the Bruins organization has been watching him closely, more so than we have, and they have all the details and they know everything. So there has to be a reason why Poitras has not been called up until recently. Which begs the next question. Why did he get called up? Because the obvious answer is that Elias Lindholm got hurt against Nashville and the Bruins needed a center iceman. And while that's definitely true and part of the reason why he got called up, it's directly the reason he got called up. If Lindholm's not hurt, there's no Poitras. But Lindholm got hurt earlier this year. Casey Middlestad got hurt earlier this year. There have been injuries up front, and the Bruins oftentimes have elected to try to plug and play with what they have on the NHL roster. Marat Husnudinov got some time in Elias Lindholm's spot when he was hurt last time. Fraser Minten has moved up into the lineup. There's been ways where the Bruins haven't had to dip down into Providence when they've had higher end players go out up front. And so why now? Why now? We'll get into that because I think there's a couple of reasons at play. And I was asked about them. So how did Poitras play in his first game up? Well, I will say this. I think Matt Poitras' first game was good, not great. I think that he clearly was trying to get himself back up to speed. It's been a while since he played at the NHL level. And I'm sure he was battling some nerves. So I'm also sure that the Bruins coaching staff knows those things too. And I bet that their bar for him will be even higher with each game that he stays with the Bruins, which right now, not to bury the lead, but Pavel Zacha is also injured for the Bruins. He got hurt against the Flyers and left that game. So heading into the Stadium Series game this weekend against the Lightning, Elias Lindholm and Pavel Zacha have both been ruled out, which means that Matt Poitras is going to have to step his game up for the Bruins. And they're going to need him to, because it's a big 2 points in the standings, and the Bruins are in the middle of a playoff race. So I think Poitras looked okay against Philly. He had a decent first period. I think he kind of went quiet for the rest of the game. He got in a little bit of a tussle at the end of regulation, which may have been frustration because maybe he knows he didn't really take advantage of the call up right away. I thought his details were okay. Like, they were fine. He didn't hurt the Bruins. He wasn't a liability defensively. He had a couple of nice scoring chances, but I don't think he impacted the game the way that he hoped that he would have or could have. But how about the rest of the team? Who did make an impact in that game? Well, Fraser Minten, right? I talked about him last episode. I talked about him a couple episodes ago. I'm going to continue to talk about him because I think that Fraser Minten is absolutely going to wear a letter for the Boston Bruins at some point in his career. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the next 3 or 4 seasons. Even with players like McAvoy and Pasternak and Elias Lindholm and Hampus Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, I could see Fraser Minten being one of those younger Letterman players in his mid-20s. He's 21 right now. At 25, absolutely, I can see it. The Bruins get Fraser Minten last year in the Brandon Carlo trade. The Bruins send Brandon Carlo to Toronto. Boston gets Fraser Minten and a 2026 first-round pick, along with a 2025 fourth-round pick, I believe, which turned into Vasek Blanar. Maybe the Bruins sent Toronto a 5th-rounder as well. I don't remember the exact details, but the major pieces are Carlo to Toronto and Minten and a first-round pick in 26 back to Boston, which, by the way, is looking like it's going to be a top 15 pick for the Bruins because Toronto is kind of plummeting, and there's talks that they're going to be selling at this year's deadline. That pick is top 5 protected. So the best case scenario for the Bruins is that that's the 6th overall pick. And I think there's a good chance that that pick could end up being 6 overall to, 15 overall or something like that. But in any event, Fraser Minten came to Boston kind of billed as like somebody with a 3rd-line center potential ceiling. And I think that his ceiling continues to rise with each passing game for the Boston Bruins. Right now, Fraser Minten, after having another 3 points against the Philadelphia Flyers, a goal and 2 assists, he now has 16 points in his last 15 games. And he has 14 goals on the year, 15 assists, 29 points in 55 games. He's on pace for 21 goals, 22 assists, 43 points in 82 games as a 21-year-old rookie who was billed as more of a defensive, two-way, reliable centerman and less of an offensive-minded centerman. So at 43 points as a rookie, 21 years old, do you think Fraser Minten's ceiling has risen? Because I think it has. Has it risen to a top 2 center? I think it has. I think Fraser Minten, what is a top 2 center, right? If you're going to be a top 2 center, what's the bare minimum amount of points that you have to put up to be considered that? 60? I mean, I think there are some 55-point second-line centers in the league, but ideally, right? Ideally, you want your second-line center to be at least a 60-point player. Okay, so he's not there yet. He's 21. I think Fraser Minten absolutely can be a 60-point player in this league when he's in his early mid-20s. Give him a couple years in the league to get confidence, to get acclimated. So what an amazing haul that has been for the Bruins. They have absolutely fleeced the Toronto Maple Leafs yet again in the trade market. Don't forget, the Bruins got Tuukka Rask from the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was a Toronto Maple Leafs draft pick. And I know Tuukka Rask is a polarizing player in Boston. His numbers are the best among Bruin goalies in the franchise's history. So objectively, in that regard, he is one of, if not the best goalies to ever don the spoked B. Obviously, a lack of ultimate playoff success as a starter has people a little bit jaded on Tuukka. It's why he's so polarizing. But nonetheless, you get Tuukka Rask from Toronto way back in the day. The Bruins traded Phil Kessel to Toronto for a couple of draft picks who turned out to be Dougie Hamilton and Tyler Seguin. Now, Tyler Seguin, neither one of those players lasted too long in Boston. But Toronto didn't have anything to do with that. Like, for all they knew, they gave Boston their top center for the next decade in Seguin and top, right shot defenseman for the next decade in Hamilton. Both of those players, I mean, Hamilton's been a top 4 defenseman on every team he's played on since he came into the league, essentially. And Sagan's been a top 6 center for, I would say, his entire career up until maybe recently with the emergence of Rupe Hintz and Wyatt Johnston and Jason Robertson over in Dallas. But the Bruins just continue to fleece Toronto, and this is just the latest example. Now, don't get me wrong, Phil Kessel was a good player for Toronto, but it didn't really amount to much. In fact, he had to go to Pittsburgh to win his cups. So, yeah, this game starts off with a 1-0 lead. Victor Arvidsson gets his 13th of the year from Middlestad and Minten. Now, Mason Lohrei has a really strong play to keep the play alive in the offensive zone at the blue line. It goes to Minten at the top of the circle, who makes a nice pass down low to Middlestad on the goal line. And it was a deceptive pass. It wasn't. There was some pressure there. There was some stick pressure there by the Flyers defense, and Minten was able to get it to Middlestad, who found Arvidsson in the slot. 1-0 Boston. Shortly thereafter, Jonathan Aspro, who is a guy that I've absolutely fallen in love with since his time in Boston started back in late October, early November. He gets his 3rd assist of the year because he's proactive and he wins a board battle in front of the Flyers bench, and he gains offensive zone entry into their zone, dishes it to the right side boards to Geekie, who finds Zacha streaking. Nice finish by Pavel Zacha, 2-0 Boston. That would be the score until the second period, where Fraser Minten gets his 2nd point of the game, his 14th goal of the year. Nice 5-hole finish on a great feed from Casey Middlestad, who had a nice play in the neutral zone to get around a checker and give a nice backhand pass to Minten in stride. Philadelphia would cut into the lead. Travis Konechny off of a Sean Corrali turnover, 3-1 Bruins. And then again, it's Middlestad and Minten connecting. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes when there's injuries, guys are forced to play together. And Minten and Middlestad, they had something going there. They have something. So I know Pavel Zacha and Arvidsson and Middlestad, they've been a good trio for Boston. I don't know. I mean, if Minten and Middlestad continue to have this type of chemistry, it's going to be tough to take them away from each other. But this is a goal by Middlestad on, again, just a great pass from Fraser Minten, who has a nice give and go with Andrew Peeke in the neutral zone, and Peeke gets Minten the puck across the blue line. Minten's coming down the left side as a left-handed shot, and just one of those no-look passes backdoor to Andrew Peeke. It should have been an empty net goal, but Peeke wasn't able to convert. Fortunately, Casey Middlestad was. 4-1 Boston. Tanner Jeannot gets a tip-in goal off a Peeke shot. 5-1 Boston. Eventually, Husadinov gets an empty net goal. It's 6-3 Boston at the end of the day. Hey, listen, it was a pretty good win by the Bruins. It was a pretty quiet game towards the end. Not a ton happening. Boston had a 5-1 lead, and that was kind of the game there. But what you like about this game is the Bruins' ability to step on the throat of a team behind them in the standings. They'll have another chance to do that coming up here against the Florida Panthers, who are directly behind Boston, albeit by 8 points. But they are the one team that is directly behind Boston for the final Eastern Conference playoff spot, and the Bruins have a chance to play them right before the Olympic break and do to Florida what they just did to the Flyers. The Flyers entered that game 8 points back of Boston. It was Boston wildcard 2, and then Florida behind Boston, and then Philly behind Florida. So the Bruins had an 8-point cushion on Philly heading into the game, and then with a regulation win, an emphatic regulation win, the Bruins have a 4-point swing, and now they're 10 points up on Philly. So that's what good teams do. You suffocate the teams that are behind you in the standings when you have an opportunity to do so. Now, I want to hear from Fraser Minten after the game here, because he had a response to a question that I think was just outstanding. And it's one of the reasons why I just think that this kid has captain material, not the C, because I think as long as Pasternak and McAvoy are around, like those are the guys that you're going to be in contention for the captaincy. But I think Fraser Minten, that next wave of Bruins beyond Pasternak and McAvoy, when they eventually go off into the sunset, and it's a team ran by James Higgins and probably Fraser Minten. Like, I think Minten is a future letterman for Boston all day. And answers like this are why I think that.
Fraser, there's so much talk when you first came up about your defensive prowess and your responsibility. Are you proud of the complete player you've kind of becoming now with your offense rounding into form in addition to your defensive stuff?
Yeah, I think that's kind of always been, what I do is a bit of both, and just responsible, trustworthy, and it's a hard league to produce in. It takes time to, like I said earlier, maybe figure out little things, but just trying to, like I said, help the team as much as I can in every area.
Do you see yourself as a kind of a top 6 guy somewhere down the road? Does that kind of your consistent role somewhere down the line?
I just want to play in the NHL. You play me wherever, I don't care.
How do you not love that answer? Do you see yourself as a top 2 center in this league? He's like, I don't care. I just want to play in the NHL. Play me wherever. I mean, that is, I'm sure, between his own ears, Fraser Minten probably has these thoughts to himself. Like, yeah, I think I'm a top 6 center, right? I mean, but I believe what he's saying there too. I mean, again, I talked about it maybe episode 1 or 2, but this year started for Fraser Minten back in the fall. Before training camp, Don Sweeney came to him and said, Fraser, we want you to go play in the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo. Fraser Minten had 25 NHL games to his name at that point. It wouldn't take much for a prospect with NHL experience to their belt to hear their GM say, hey, go play in a rookie showcase tournament before training camp, and roll their eyes at that. In their head, not to the GM, but in their head. Fraser didn't do that. He put his head down and said, yes, sir, no problem. And used it as an opportunity to get his feet wet, to get his touches before training camp so that he could hit training camp in stride. That's how his season started. His season started in a rookie showcase prospects tournament in Buffalo, New York. And right now, he is emerging as a fringe 3C, 2C right now as a 21-year-old on pace for a 43-point season in his first full year in the NHL. That takes a lot of maturity, and it takes a lot of two-way polish to his game. So, when you hear him say, I just want to play in the NHL, I don't care where it is, I believe that mentality. That's the mentality of a future captain. Okay, switching gears here now. As I said earlier, the Bruins have their 6th outdoor game in franchise history this weekend against the Tampa Bay Lightning. What about the 5 previous games that they had? Where do those rank? How do those stack up? Well, let's refresh our memories here. The first one was in 2010 against the Philadelphia Flyers at Fenway Park. The second one was 2016 at Gillette against the Canadiens. They lost that game. The third one was at Notre Dame in 2019 against the Blackhawks. The fourth one was 2021 against the Flyers in Lake Tahoe. And then the fifth one was 2023 Winter Classic at Fenway again against the Penguins. So I did poll listeners online to see what their rankings were. And ironically enough, they matched my personal rankings that I have here that we're about to go through. So I guess great minds do think alike. I will shout out those survey results at the end here. So let's go through and we'll go from worst to best. So we'll start with number 5. And I don't think there's going to be many surprises here. But at number 5 for me, I have the 2016 Winter Classic at Gillette Stadium. This was a 5-1 drubbing by the Montreal Canadiens against the Boston Bruins. This is a time where the Bruins were in transition. A lot of the guys from the 2011 team were no longer around. You still had Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, Chara, Seidenberg, Rask, Krug, McQuaid. You still had those guys. I think you may have had Chris Kelly to start the year, but that may have been when he broke his tibia. So half the roster from 2011 was gone. The Bruins were in cap jail. They were en route to missing the playoffs for the second consecutive season. And to add insult to injury, they were without Brad Marchand, who was suspended a game or two prior for low bridging Mark Borowiecki of the Ottawa Senators. And David Pastrnak was in his second year. He was also in Claude Julien's doghouse at the time. He was playing pretty much fourth line minutes, but he was injured for this game. I think he had a wrist injury. So this game had no Marchand, no Pastrnak. I think Charlie McAvoy was yet to be drafted. I forget what year McAvoy was drafted. Was he drafted in 16? Somebody correct me on that in the comments. But anyway, McAvoy was not on the roster at this point. I don't even know if he was drafted yet. So this game looked cool. I think the aesthetics were okay. I didn't love the Bruins uniforms for this game. I thought they were kind of boring. The Canadiens uniforms were great. A lot of Canadiens fans kind of migrated south from Quebec to attend this game, and boy, were they happy that they did so. This one, to me, it's not number 5 just because the Bruins lost, because the Bruins could have lost this game like 5-4 in overtime, and I'm sure I could have had it higher on the list despite them losing because the game could have been good. But the reality is this game was very boring. The Bruins didn't score a goal until the third period when they were already down 3-0. And, Montreal just kind of had their way with Boston. They outskated them. They outplayed them. And so this game is number 5 on my list. I've actually had people that were at this game that said they had a miserable time. I'm sure that there are many people who went and had a great time despite the score. And if you are one of those people who was at this game, despite the Bruins losing 5-1, I hope that you had a really good time. But compared to the other games on this list, it is last for me. And so number 5 is the 2016 Winter Classic against the Montreal Canadiens. Number 4, the 2019 Winter Classic at Notre Dame against the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, this one may be surprising to some of you, and it's kind of surprising to me too. It's just that the Bruins won this game 3-2, or you know what? It may have been 4-2 with an empty net. It was 4-2 with an empty net. Cool atmosphere. Notre Dame is a classic stadium. You have 2 Original Six rivals that played in the Stanley Cup Finals 6 years prior. Lot of talent out there. Taves, Kane, Duncan Keith was still there for the Blackhawks and some other players. This is the year the Bruins went to the Cup Finals in 2019. So they had that older core of Marchand, Krejci, Bergeron, Chara, mixed with the younger core of Pasternak and DeBrusk and Carlo and Grzelcyk and guys like that. So this was a good game. Good atmosphere, good uniforms, good result for Boston. It's just kind of not as memorable as the other ones. And maybe it's because it was away for Boston, right? I mean, the Bruins were the road team here. So there wasn't that local flair. This game was a great Winter Classic. It was good for the Bruins to get back on the winning side of these showcase games. They were 1-1 at this point, and they were coming off of the 2016 Winter Classic where they got embarrassed. So there were some stakes on the line here of, hey, don't be embarrassed here. But this was a good game. It's just, for me, it's number 4 on my list. Number 3, the 2023 Winter Classic, the Bruins versus the Pittsburgh Penguins at Fenway Park. So this game, to me, was a good one. Again, the local flair, the baseball uniforms that the Bruins wore, they all wore the Red Sox uniforms heading into the stadium. That was cool. I should say the last game too, at Notre Dame, the Bruins did the Peaky Blinders theme. That was cool. I don't recall a theme against Montreal at Foxborough. Maybe they weren't really doing that back then. But the 23 Winter Classic was a good game. I mean, you had Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, Malkin. And ultimately, it was a come from behind win for the Bruins in the third period. Jake DeBrusk tied the game and also got the winner. The Bruins entered the third down 1-0. And it turns out that DeBrusk was playing on a broken leg. He was actually out for a couple months after this game. But I would say this is 3 on the list because it was the second time that they had played at Fenway. So it's not going to be better than the first time, especially when we all know how the first one ended. So that's what it comes down to for me. Good game, fun time. And actually, the weather was really good for this game. I think it was around 55 degrees in Boston on January 1st. So a fun time for the fans. But this is good enough for 3 on the list, but no higher than that. Number 2 for me is 2021 Lake Tahoe. I just thought that this game was really, really unique. I mean, the backdrop was outstanding, truly breathtaking. And the game itself, I mean, the Bruins kicked ass. They won the game 7-3. David Pasternak had a hat trick. This is the infamous Barbie girl interview that he had where he's wearing the glasses and having a good time. I thought that the 80s, 90s apparel that the team wore walking to the venue was pretty cool. And I thought that this uniform matchup was really cool too. I mean, these Bruins jerseys were pretty much their new current jerseys, but in yellow. It was one of their reverse retro looks. And I thought that the gold Bruins against the orange Flyers with the sunset backdrop was just a beautiful thing to watch on TV. And again, the Bruins kicked ass, and it was a novel venue that has never been done before. And I hope the league does something like this again in the future. But that was a beautiful game for the Bruins and the Flyers to be a part of. And so that's number 2 on my list. Number 1 will be no surprise. That is the 2010 Winter Classic. Marco Sturm with the overtime winner. Now, this one for the Bruins was nail-biting because this was only the 3rd Winter Classic ever in the NHL. And they entered the 3rd period down 1-0, and they were still down 1-0 with only 2 minutes and change remaining in the game. So the Bruins were very close to being shut out on home ice at Fenway Park in the 3rd ever Winter Classic. And that would have just been brutal PR for both the team and the fans to stomach. I mean, to not have to cheer once after the national anthem would have been a tough pill to swallow. But Mark Recchi was able to tie the game late in regulation on a nice slap pass in the power play from Derek Morris. And then Marco Sturm, current head coach of the Boston Bruins, with the overtime winner on a feed from Patrice Bergeron. To me, that was the number 1 outdoor game for the Bruins to this point. And I think that my list is pretty comparable to a lot of people's lists. And in fact, let me pull up now the poll to see what other people thought of their favorite rankings. And so 41.8% of people voted 2010 at Fenway versus Philly. 34% of people voted 2021 versus Philly at Lake Tahoe. 18.1% of people voted 2023 versus Pittsburgh at Fenway. And 6% voted 2019 versus Chicago at Notre Dame. And Gillette, quite frankly, wasn't really an option because I could only fit 4 options on Twitter, and I just didn't think that was going to get a lot of votes. So those all stack up with my rankings as well. And so we'll see where Boston versus Tampa Bay at Raymond James Stadium ends up on that list after Sunday. Now, that leads us into the preview of that game. Aesthetically, I think it's really cool. That is how you do a outdoor game in the state of Florida. If you haven't seen the renderings, they're around online. You'll see it on Sunday at the latest, but surrounding the ice surface, they have, just pretty cool, like pirate treasure maps, that have, different Easter eggs to players and teams involved in the game. For example, like there's something called Braden's Point, which is like a, area of water on the map. It's cool. It's cool. It kind of looks like something out of NHL Hits because they used to have a pirate ship on the video game NHL Hits. It looks like a lot like that. And it's just so much better than what the Panthers and Rangers did for the Winter Classic. That inside of a dome in Miami, it looked like they were at a Pitbull concert. I hated that. Boring game too. This game coming up right now between the Bruins and the Lightning, it's 2 teams in the playoff spot. 2 teams that if the playoffs were to start today would be playing each other in the first round. Now, I talked about earlier how the Bruins are without Elias Lindholm and Pavel Zacha for this game. So as if playing Tampa Bay wasn't going to be hard enough, now Boston has to do so without their number 1 and number 2 centers. Now, how good is Tampa Bay really? Well, let me read you off some numbers and some rankings league-wide for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Right now, Tampa is 2nd in the NHL with 72 points. They're 2nd in the NHL in points percentage at .692. They are 2nd in the NHL in goal differential at +52. They are 2nd in the NHL in goals for per game at 3.46. So they're scoring 3.46 goals per game on average. They're 31st in the NHL in goals against per game at 2.48. So they are the 2nd highest scoring team and they're the second stingiest defensively. They are second in the NHL on the penalty kill at 84.6%. And then hold on to your chairs here. Everybody, hold on to your chairs. They're 14th on the power play at 21.3%. That's their Achilles heel. They're 14th on the power play. That is as bad as the rankings get for Tampa Bay. Their worst ranking is still in the upper half of the league. So when you compare that to Boston, the Bruins are 9th in goal differential at plus 15. So the Bruins are 9th in the NHL in goal differential at plus 15. Tampa Bay is second at plus 52. So Boston's good. Boston's a top 10 team, but they still aren't sniffing Tampa Bay's goal differential. Boston does have a better power play percentage than Tampa. Boston is 4th in the NHL in the power play at 26.8%. They're 8th in goals for per game, 3.35. So Tampa's scoring 3.46 goals per game and Boston scoring 3.35. Here's where Boston is vulnerable, is the penalty kill. They have the 26th ranked penalty kill in the league right now at 77.6% kill rate. So Boston's going to have to improve there, not just against Tampa, but down the stretch if they want to be a playoff team or continue to be a playoff team and certainly have any chance at making some noise in the playoffs. So it's a big game for Boston. Again, you want to finish strong. You're 4-0-1 since losing to Dallas, who broke your 6-game win streak. So, again, as I said off the top, they're 11-2-1 in the month of January. They're 12-2-1 dating back to New Year's Eve against Edmonton. So Boston's playing some really good hockey. But isn't it amazing? Isn't it just amazing that Boston is 9th overall in the NHL standings in points, but they're 5th in their own division? That is crazy. That is insane to me that one division has 5 teams in the top 10. That's bonkers. And oh, by the way, if you were to tell me that that the Atlantic has 5 teams in the top 10 before the season started, you bet your ass I'd be saying that Florida and Toronto would be 2 of them. And no, they're in the bottom third of the Atlantic Division right now. So you have Tampa Bay coming up in the Stadium Series, and then again, it's going to be a slugfest against Florida in the final game before the Olympic break. Florida knows that game is going to be huge for against Boston. If Boston wins that game in regulation against Florida, who's already 8 points back of Boston in the standings, oh boy. So I think Florida is going to treat that game, especially right before the Olympic break. They're going to leave it all on the line. So Boston's going to be ready to go against both of these Florida teams. Okay, let's move along now to the Q&A segment of this episode before we sign out today. And first off, I'm going to go to a voicemail from Mark, and he had a question regarding Matt Poitras and the reasoning behind his call-up.
Hey, Brian. Mark Oliver from Black and Gold Productions. Calling in on Thursday, January 29th, with the Bruins releasing an announcement of Matt Poitras getting called up from Providence. Assumingly, this is due to the Elias Lindholm injury. But I'm kind of thinking that this could be a trade showcase opportunity as well, because if you think back to when Elias was injured previously this season, Poitras wasn't the recall. So I'm curious on getting your thoughts, and you do a great job on this show, and keep up the great work. Take care, B.
Thanks for the question, Mark, and I appreciate the listenership and the support as always. As far as your question regarding Poitras, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier in the episode when I mentioned that the Bruins had injuries earlier this year and Poitras was not called up. So why call him up now? Well, I think the main reason is, yes, they needed a body because Elias Lindholm, I think they knew was going to be out more than just one game. I also think that Poitras has played better hockey more recently than he had earlier in the year when Boston had injuries. So I think that's probably the biggest reason. At the same time, to the crux of your question, Mark, and you're not the only one who asked me this. I got some responses online saying the same thing pretty much. I don't rule it out. I don't rule it out at all. I tend to live in a world full of gray. I try to avoid black and white thinking when I can, and I think that it could be a little bit of everything. I think it was a good opportunity to call up Poitras because the opportunity presented itself with Lindholm's injury and now Zacha's injury. So they're really going to need Poitras to play well in the meantime. But I think all things can be true. I think, yes, Boston needed a body up the middle. I think, yes, Poitras has been playing well in Providence. His details have been good. Marco Sturm said before the Philly game that he trusts Poitras. So I think that his play down in Providence merited a call-up. And I also think that, you know what? It's good for the Bruins to see Poitras at the NHL level. And it's not the worst thing for other teams around the league to see him either. So if somebody happens to watch Poitras in Boston, but not in Providence, and they call up Don Sweeney and give him a sweet offer, then, hey, we'll listen. Do I think that they called him up for the sole purpose of a showcase? I don't think that. I think more than likely it's the first two things that I said. They needed a replacement for Lindholm, and Poitras is playing well right now, whereas earlier this year, he wasn't playing well in Providence. He was battling with confidence issues and production issues. I think he was trying hard the whole time. His effort was never really in question, but his performance wasn't really where it needed to be for a call-up at the time. So I think the biggest reason he was called up was because A, they needed somebody. B, he's been playing really well. And then in a distant third, I don't think in Don Sweeney's mind it hurts anybody, player, organization, or other teams to see Matt get some games at the NHL level. So thank you for the question, Mark. I appreciate it. And let's get to some comments and questions that came in from you, the listeners, over the last few days. And I'm just going to put my glasses on here so I can read these. Okay, so this is from number one Brad Marchand Truther on X. They say, I was at Fenway in 2023, and I had to watch the condensed game when I got home because you couldn't see anything. 2010 was cool. I liked Tahoe because of the scenery, and it gave me my favorite Gary Bettman line quote, "The sun is our enemy." So, yeah, I think that's a valid criticism about Winter Classic games in baseball stadiums is the sightlines aren't always the best, especially at Fenway. That's definitely the one pro I think Gillette had over Fenway was the sightlines for fans. Obviously, the game kind of sucked. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I agree with those other comments too. 2010 was cool because it was the first, right? And it was outdoor games were still very much novel experiences at the time back in 2010, whereas in 2023, yeah, there's been so many outdoor games in the NHL since Buffalo and Pittsburgh had the first Winter Classic back in 2008. And there were a couple outdoor games before that too, some Heritage Classics and whatnot. But yeah, thanks for the question, Brad Marchand Truther. Let's see. Marchand Fan 63 says, Brian, what would it take to get Tim Stützle from the Senators? Imagine geeky Stützle and pasta. Well, Marshy, I think that I don't think that's happening. I think that Tim Stützle is 24 years old, and I think he's the centerpiece of the Ottawa Senators franchise along with Brady Tkachuk. I don't think Ottawa has any desire to move him. He's, as I said, he's 24 years old. He's a legit number one center. He's nearly a point per game player at his young age of 24. He's got a ton of skill, and he's got some grit too to go along with it. I guess to answer your question, Marshy, I would say to get Tim Stützle in Boston, I think it starts with James Higgins. and Boston's 2026 first round pick from Toronto, probably, and maybe another pick, maybe, I don't know, and probably a top 6 forward. So I guess maybe like James Higgins, a 26 first, and Zaka or something like that. I mean, I'm just spitballing. I just don't see it happening either way. Yeah. So that's my uninformed guess at what that would look like. Let's see. Vermont Chive guy on Twitter says tied for 4th in wins in the NHL. Loser point is taking its toll on us as well. Now, this is in response to me going online and talking about what I said earlier, which is the Bruins are 9th in the NHL in points, 5th in their division. And I also said that only 3 teams in the NHL have more wins than the Bruins. And that's true. Only 3 teams have more wins than Boston, and it's Colorado, Tampa Bay, and Carolina. That's it. That's the list. So Vermont Chive guy here is saying that the Bruins are tied for 4th in the NHL in wins, but the loser point is taking its toll on us as well. So what he's saying is we have so many wins, yet we're not really reflecting that in the standings. And it's because he's right. The Bruins only have 3 overtime losses this year, where most teams have, 6, 7 plus, right? So the Bruins have a lot of the Bruins losses have come. More of the Bruins losses have come in regulation compared to other teams' losses, if that makes any sense. Bill Audette on Twitter says, maybe it's just history, but Florida continues to worry me. Their loss last night helped, but they have 2 games in hand, so the 8-point lead could seem bigger than it actually is. Losing regulation to them next week, and it will start to feel uncomfortable. Yeah, Bill, I mean, that's what happens when you've won 2 straight Stanley Cups and been to 3 finals in a row, is you deserve that respect. So the Florida Panthers, despite being 8 points back of Boston, to your point, let's say they win their games in hand on Boston, so then they're really 4 points back. And then if you lose to them head-to-head in regulation, now Florida's 2 points back, right? Theoretically. So that's why you're saying that it could start to feel uncomfortable. And you're right. If all those things happen, then yeah, I mean, definitely. So the Florida Panthers deserve everybody's respect, regardless of how far out of the playoffs they are right now. Until there's only a week or 2 left and they're still up by 10 points, then, they have a chance. And by the way, Sasha Barkov was on the ice skating with other injured Panthers recently. So if he gets back on the ice, look out. Mike on Twitter says, hope he gets an extended look with ample ice time. Criminal how awful of a job they're doing in Providence with developing players. So that's in response to my commentary about Matt Poitras getting called up and having an opportunity now. Yeah, I mean, Mike, I really can't speak too much of, the job that they're doing down in Providence, because I'm not covering the Providence Bruins. I'm not watching them daily. At the same time, people can only develop so much. And by people, I mean coaches and managers and scouts and whatnot. The players have to essentially, when you're in the minors, you have to really stand out among the rest. And I think that it always comes down to the player. You can have all the counsel and advice in the world, and that definitely helps. Coaching is definitely a part of it. But take Fabian Lysell, for example. Coaches down in Providence can tell Fabian Lysell till they're blue in the face about, make sure you're doing this detail or that detail. And if the player doesn't do it, and I'm not saying he's not doing it, but hypothetically, if coaches are telling players this is what you have to do and they're not doing it, well, what else can anybody do, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. So I'm not sure how much of that is at play here, but as far as Poitras getting an extended look, right now he's going to get that extended look with ample ice time because they have no Elias Lindholm or Pavel Zacha. And what Matt Poitras does with that is up to Matt Poitras, right? So if he goes, scoreless for the next couple of games and he's a dash player, and he's not making much of an impact, well, that's on him, right? Conversely, if he puts up points and is solid and makes an impact, then yeah, he'll earn more opportunity. This one is from Don Sweeney on X. Which path would you take? A, sell high on guys like Zacha, Middlestat, Arvidsson, rebuild everything outside McAvoy and Pasternak, aim to draft more legit core pieces, or B, keep this roster mostly intact, hope Hagens and prospects picks trades are sufficient to round out the roster during 88 and 73 prime years. Yeah, it's path A for me. I'm sorry, path B. It's path B for me. I mean, listen, just because the Bruins are 9th in the NHL in points right now, that's not fooling me. I don't think that they're some cup contender right now, but they've already matched their win total from last year, and there's still 27 games to go. So, they would have to lose every game for the rest of the year to end up with a top 5 pick again, theoretically. It's not happening. So my point is this team is not as bad as people, thought they were going to be. I think that if you start to sell everybody off, you're going to piss off like your core players, and they want to win. They want to compete. And the good news is, you do have Hagens, right? You do have Zellers. You do have Letourneau. You do have 5 first-round picks in the next 3 drafts. So, I mean, you don't have to sell off all of your roster pieces right now to get draft capital. Like you have a ton of draft capital right now, both in prospects and futures. And that's because you sold last year. So listen, would I trade Arvidsson for a first round pick if somebody called me on him? Yes, I think I would. I think the Bruins heading into this trade deadline I don't think they should be buyers or sellers solely. I think that it's a case-by-case basis. And if somebody calls and wants to give you an overpay for an expiring contract, I think you have to really, really listen to it. As far as Zacha and Middlestat go, I think Zacha is going to re-sign in Boston on a team-friendly deal while still getting paid because, he's making $4.75 right now. I think he'll probably make near $6 million on an annual basis going forward. Starting the year after next, because he's still under contract next year too. So I think he'll probably get $1.5 million raise. But with the cap going up, it's still going to be a similar percentage against the cap as his team-friendly deal is now. So I think the player will get a raise, and it'll still be a team-friendly deal. And as far as Casey Middlestat goes, again, he has another year under his contract right now. I think that they'll probably wait until next season to decide on his future with the Bruins. So, yeah, listen, to answer your question, you want to keep the roster mostly. I don't even know if mostly is the right word, but you want to identify who your long-term players are and who your core is. Right now, I think it's McAvoy, it's Pasternak, it's Geeky, it's Minten, it's Husnudinov, it's Zacha, it is Zadorov, it's both Lindholms due to contracts. And I think, and Swayman, those are your, and then, your bottom lineup guys, there's no reason to get rid of a Kastelik or Jeannot. Now they're role players, but yeah, I think the Bruins, I think 60 to 65% of their roster is pretty solid right now. And then you always have to kind of, tinker around the edges. Right? Is Henry Jokiharju somebody I think is here long-term? No. I mean, he still has a couple years left of this deal, but he's probably not long-term. Arvidsson's not long-term. Peake's not long-term. Aspro just signed a bridge deal. Steve signed a bridge deal. So I think they have a good thing going right now. And between Hagens and Zellers and Letourneau and other prospects that they're going to draft pretty soon, I think they're in good shape to kind of keep doing what they're doing. And trend upward. This is from Sean D. He says, I'm ready for Sweeney to give this guy an extension. Nice little 4 or 5 year deal at $3.5-4 million. This is in reference to Fraser Minten. And yeah, Sean, I agree. I mean, right now he's got 1 more year after this on his rookie contract. So, you know what? Whenever he's able to negotiate that, definitely get Minten as quick as you can. Pugmom 2 says, I see this as a showcase. Makes you wonder if they view Lashmelis as a better player for the team going forward. A little bigger, better skater, more international play, very strong group of NCAA centers coming. Higgins, Pelosi, Gasso, and Walsh. Yeah, this is in reference to, similar to Mark's voicemail, was calling up Matt Poitras a showcase. And I can't sit here and say that it's not a showcase to an extent. I think, like I said, I think a lot of things can be true. And I think that the Bruins are absolutely listening on Matt Poitras if teams are interested in him. So, and as far as Dan's Lashmelis, I love Lashmelis. I think he has an NHL future for sure. Obviously, Higgins does. I think the jury's still out on Pelosi, Gasso, and Walsh, but I'm not going to deny those players. So listen, I think it's a wait and see with Poitras. Like I don't think the Bruins are giving up on him. But if teams are interested and they're calling about him, I think Don's picking up that phone call without hesitation, as he should. Jeff on Twitter says, 2010 Fenway can't be topped. The event was still unique enough that it was a big deal. The uniforms are great and they won. Tahoe was insane, but no fan element. Hot take, I'd put Gillette over Fenway too. By 2023, outdoor games have been watered down, plus repeat location. So, Jeff, I like all those comments. I do think that's a hot take just because the Gillette game was so bad. It was such a bad game. Now, does the stadium get faulted for that? Does the aesthetics get faulted for that? No. And I do hear what you're saying. At that point, like, outdoor games weren't as watered down. It wasn't the second time playing at Fenway. And also, there's been a bunch of college games at Fenway over the years, too, frozen Fenway. So seeing hockey rinks at Fenway has been very, very normal the last 15 years. So I hear what you're saying there. I appreciate a good hot take. And Lake Tahoe was insane. The lack of fans was the part that, like, obviously you're missing. But at the same time, that's kind of what was cool about it, is that they were playing on a lake with snow-capped mountains in the background. Like, you don't get that if there's a stadium full of fans. And so it's kind of it's kind of the give and take of that environment. And then 2010 Fenway was the novel experience, great uniform matchup as well. And unfortunately the Flyers got the last laugh that year, but in the playoffs. But upstate New York Puck fan says the Lake Tahoe game was breathtaking with the scenery. The lack of stands was a real positive. So a little bit of a different take than Jeff on that one. Jeff didn't say, he just mentioned the no fan element. But anyway, I know they'd never do it again, but it was a great idea and a great show to do when they wouldn't have fans anyway. And so, and that part's true too, is the NHL did the Lake Tahoe game when there were no fans in the arena still. So I thought it was a really cool experience, a really novel experience for the players and for the viewers at home. And I think they should do more things like that. It would be good to get some fans around for something like that too. But they did a really good job. And I'm hoping that Sunday at Raymond James Stadium is, while not really a novel experience, because an outdoor game in a football stadium is far from original now, but I do think that they did a good job with the atmosphere, based on renderings I've seen online and some media coming from that game. So it should be a fun game. It should be a really competitive game. Again, no Lindholm, no Poitras, no Lindholm, no Zacha. Heightened role for Poitras and Fraser Minten, who, again, he's been playing great. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. enjoy Bruins and the Lightning on Sunday. And oh, by the way, if you haven't watched it already, and I'm going to do this when I go home tonight, there's a really cool documentary on Netflix called The Boys of 80. And it's obviously about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team with some refurbished footage from the Olympic Village and the game itself. So it's a lot of times vintage footage is very fuzzy and not very clear. They were able to repurpose some footage from the Olympic Village and the games and make it look as like high def as possible for our viewing experience here in 2026. So definitely watch that. I'm going to watch it when I get home tonight. And we got Olympic hockey coming out here too. So we have a lot to talk about. But thank you all very much for listening. And I will talk to you on Monday.